So I'm actually an ear, nose and throat surgeon, although I don't do the EN anymore, I'm just a T surgeon these days. I have a strong interest in research for the benefit of the patients that we see. I work at UCL, and this will be of necessity. I've changed the title slightly, focused towards regenerative medicine. I hope that reflects the flavour of some of the things we're talking about today. Regenerative medicine encompasses a whole range of things you probably know. It's something that's brought together a lot of technology that used to be around for decades, but now the thing that's different about regenerative medicine is that it's combining therapies together, combining technologies in a way that wasn't previously possible. So chemists talking to engineers, talking to clinicians, talking to business people to make something that works quicker, better, and actually treats patients in a lot shorter time than has been possible previously. UCL, I'm going to continue the advert actually, I'm sorry about this, is particularly good at this. We are particularly good at this translational end of stuff. In terms of stem cell science, Britain is first and foremost in the world outside the States, and Cambridge and Edinburgh are particularly good. But we here are the best at actually turning those into therapies. One small example is that last year we produced 10 times the number of cell therapies produced in the entire of Holland. That's just at UCL. So we're tremendously productive in eyes, in neuroscience, in cardiology, in a lot of things. Now, surgeons historically have been viewed very much like this, haven't they? Sadly. They've been very much viewed as, and I choose the term clinician scientist with caution. It's certainly something that Dion and I and others here would recognise, but it's not universally recognised as such. My boss at Bristol, when I was senior lecturer there, John Farndon, had a picture on his wall which was similar to this, and it's a picture of a bridge. And the point is that at one end of the bridge are all the surgeons and the surgical community who are busily going about their ways, delivering quality care, spending all their time operating, looking after patients and so on. And then at this end of the bridge are scientists. And the scientists are in the laboratories doing great discovery stuff and developing as many new treatments as they possibly can. But somebody has to stand in the middle of the bridge and get the two talking to each other. And that is where the clinician scientist comes in. But it is a very lonely place, as John warned me back in the early 90s, in that the surgeons will always think, okay, this also extends to physicians, gynecologists, dentists, anybody who's involved in the clinical arena, that your full-time clinical colleagues will always regard you as part-time and not necessarily as good as they are. Because they're practicing the whole time, how can you possibly be as good as they are? Whereas the scientists will never truly accept you as scientists, because you've had an easy time, you've had a big salary, you've been through medical school, it's all piece of pie, and you might have gone out and done a PhD for 3 years, but that's not the hard graft that scientists have put in to get there on no salaries whatsoever. So you're not really accepted by either of these two, but somehow you have to link. I think we've moved on from there, just as regenerative medicine has moved on. I think we're now more, this is more science in the round, as it were. And can we go up a bit? Oops, sorry, down, there we go. More science in the round. So, I heard a very good talk last night actually from the eye hospital about where regenerative medicine in eyes was going. And they were saying that clinical trials are often displayed in a linear way. So you start out with an idea and end up with a treatment that's in patient care. But actually, the clinical trial's at the centre, and there's lots of things feeding into it. And I think this is true of where we are too as clinician scientists. In the centre of this may be the trial, but it's certainly the patient. And that's what we see, it's what Dion and I see every day. It's the patient with a problem that is imperfectly treated and something that we'd like to do something about. Now, quite rightly, NIHR concentrate on how important the patient is and try and pull the patients more and more into defining our research priorities, defining the shape of the research that we do, and so on. Nonetheless, they need to be led by the hand. And this is deliberately paternalistic because in many ways, even the most educated of patients do need to be led a little bit through this. So this is a partnership, but it's a partnership between the clinicians and the patients at the centre. And all around the outside are all these other people. The scientists, the engineers and the chemists, the business people, the experts in qualitative research, trial methodologists, industry itself, even the government. Okay, sorry. And this is John Tooks, our Vice Provost here, and this is his diagram of the research process from bench to actual health gain. You could make it as long or as short as you want. There's lots of variations in this, but it essentially has two gaps, two difficult areas where we can go from a new discovery into a new treatment. And the first one is actually getting something from bench to bedside. And we're going to be hearing a little bit later, I think, from one of my colleagues, successfully crossing the valley of death later from George. So I won't go into that at this stage. Suffice to say, it is tough. getting across there, and it is not called the Valley of Death for nothing. But actually, this bit here, the gap 2, from the point where we know that a treatment actually works, because phase 3 trials have repeatedly demonstrated it, to actually getting into routine healthcare and National Health Service is well over a decade and sometimes 15 years. That is absolutely appalling. And it's something that we have to get down. And that's why a number of things have been set up to try and deal with this. Now, when I talk about these things, it's a bit like sort of today's Sesame Street's brought to you by the letters A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, D, K. It's a bit like that. And some of you are too young for Sesame Street, but the others will explain to you later. So what we tried to do in the UK is set up force collaboration, as it were, between universities and hospitals. And it is a bit forced at times because they do have different outcome measures. The outcome measure of university is different from that of hospital. But it is starting to bear fruit. The first things were the biomedical research centres, which are at the top here. So that's one university, one hospital. And we have one at UCL, UCLH. And money comes with that. It's not necessarily been channeled into translation historically. Then there are the academic medical centres based on the Cleveland Clinic model or Utrecht or Leipzig, where you actually have a group of hospitals, all of whom are first class, linked with a group of universities who are also first class, preferably one university. And UCL Partners is such an academic medical centre, or academic health science centre down here. It's the next one down. And they didn't come with any money. 5 were designated, didn't come with any money, but they did start people talking. And the power of this is the power of embarrassment. So the chief executives of the trusts and the vice chancellors, with respect, come together from time to time and discuss where the barriers are to making this part of cardiology move a bit forward, or that bit of gynecology move a bit further forward. And in that way, by the power of embarrassment, things have actually started to move. Now, further down, the academic health science systems, they're kind of intermediate. Right down the bottom, academic health science networks. This is where we're leading to now, and this is where this is second translational gap, and a lot of science will be concentrated at that interface. Actually, having proven the regenerative treatment works, how do we actually then get it out there? And again, where we are, I would say this, but UCLP and our new academic health science network, should we be designated next month, which I'm sure we will be, is a great place to do this, because we will have 6 million people. We extend out into Essex and Hertfordshire. It's 10% of the National Health Service. And we're already making a good start on that. So we have ways of doing it. This is a year in the life of a high-risk diabetic. And so each one of these, so these are all diabetics, different diabetics, going to their general practitioner. And these are all events in their life where they've contacted the health system. So you can see the strain on the health service from this. And it amounts to about £10 billion a year treating diabetes in the United Kingdom. It's going up. There are more treatments and far more patients. Obesity, old age, all the rest of it. It's going to at some point reach something like a fifth of the entire National Health Service expenditure at present rates. So clearly, there is a huge imperative to try and think of better ways of doing this. And there's a lot of effort in the field of regenerative medicine to try and deal with this. So that's all about that. So there are some very, very big healthcare questions that are driving the way that funding streams are going at the moment. But on the other end of the spectrum, there are also the orphan illnesses. Orphan illnesses are illnesses for which there may or may not be many patients, but there certainly is no proper cure or proper treatment that gives people a reasonable quality of life. So for these, and if you group them together, they still form about a third of healthcare. They are the ones that otherwise might fall between fall between things that you fall between. Thank you. Thank you. That'll do. However, in regenerative medicine, they are often ideal targets, because here is an area where you can make a difference to a very small number of patients and immediately something be seen to work or not. And if it's life or death, it's the parachute scenario. Do you need a randomized controlled trial to prove that the parachute works? Well, you can try it if you like, but I think I'm going to have the parachute. I'm not going to enter that trial. Okay. So some years ago, I'd been working on conventional means of reconstructing patients with throat disease and head and neck cancer, and we realised where trends were going and started to do some work on tissue engineering. Could we use biomaterials and other materials combined with cells to actually start regenerating organs and tissues rather than moving around bits of the body in a way which was highly morbid and unsatisfactory and not really providing the function that we wanted? So we started working with the windpipe in pigs and got some early good results. And this culminated in 2008 in the world's first stem cell-based organ transplant in a lady in Spain. And 5 years down the line, she's actually doing extremely well. She's still working full-time. We then went back to the lab, though, because having done that, it was very much thrown together, And we have Ian Rees from the MHRA here somewhere. But it was thrown together in all sorts of ways, including from the regulatory point of view. But it's all historical. I'm hoping we've all been forgiven by now. We had to go back to the laboratory and work out how we could do this better in future, because it was very Heath Robinson. And Heath Robinson, you'll know? Oh, well, look it up. It was thrown together. So we knew that we didn't know enough about this in order to make it work for lots of different people. So we went back to the labs. But then 2 years later, we were still researching all this and trying to raise funds for our research. We were approached by my friend Martin Elliott at Great Ormond Street. Hang on, go back up. Has anybody seen this video before? Who's seen this video before? Okay, good. Right, let's run it anyway. Fine. About a child in Belfast who he'd been treating since he was an infant for congenital tracheal stenosis. He'd been born with a 1 millimetre trachea. You normally need about 4 millimetres to breathe through. And he'd been kept alive for years and years by having a stent inserted. A stent is a synthetic tube which holds open a hollow organ, be it an artery, be it an airway. In this case, it was a metal stent. And the virtue of metal stents is that they're easy to put in, and you can expand them. So as the child grows, you can put a balloon in and make it bigger and bigger and bigger. The problem is, over time, they actually migrate outside, so they no longer become as functional. He reached the age of 10 by having a sequence of these stents, but one morning he woke up, coughed, and blood started pouring out of his mouth. And it had eroded into his aorta, the big blood vessel in the chest. Happy it stopped, he was stabilised in Belfast, and then sent down to Great Ormond Street, where Martin phoned us and said, "We're in real trouble here, this kid's going to die. Can we do what you did for the woman in Spain?" Well, we had modified our procedures quite a lot by this stage, and we used an intraoperative protocol because of speed. It had taken us 4 months to prepare for Claudia. Here we only had a matter of weeks. So with the help of the NHS Blood and Transplant Service, we got hold of a donated trachea from a transplant donor and stripped out all the cells from it. That is, we stripped out those bits which would have rejected had it been a conventional transplant organ. And then we, with the help of Mark Liddell from the cell therapy laboratories at the Royal Free, we extracted bone marrow from him at the start of the operation. And then while Martin Elliott was very skillfully repairing the aorta, Mark Liddell's team separated out the enriched mesenchymal stem cell fraction. We'd given him some chemicals beforehand to boost that up a bit. And then that was then layered onto the trachea and placed in situ in the child. Now, he had a stormy course thereafter. It wasn't straightforward. He, in fact, spent 6 months in hospital for a variety of reasons. But after that time, he was discharged, and now he's well over 2 years down the line, and he received a National Bravery Award in Northern Ireland 3 weeks ago, at which ceremony he played the drums. So he's doing staggeringly well. He's back at school, he's growing, and he actually doesn't want to come back for follow-up anymore because he's now a teenager, of course. And teenagers don't want to do anything they don't particularly want to do, particularly during daylight hours. So, this was an amazing success. Now, there's a huge amount of oh, no, don't again. No, not again, okay. So this is what it looked like to start with. This is after a few months, and this was after a year. It doesn't look like a normal airway, but it doesn't matter. So long as it works, that's what matters. And this is him now. Okay, so again, we looked at this and we realised again, this is still pretty messy. And we started to go back and talk to the scientists at UCL, of which we have a plethora. We have 4,000 biomedical research groups at UCL. And about some of the things that we needed to know about. And happily, all of these have been fed into a national process now for what are called platform technologies. And a bidding process has gone out to understand the niches. The niches is the environment that the cell is in, be it physical, be it chemical, be it the other cells around it. In situ differentiation, where we get the cells from, look after them, how to make the epithelium grow better, blood vessels, not so much of a problem actually, and what materials we should be using. Should we be using synthetics instead? So this is a very key thing. So, and it's something that's not properly worked out, is if you are doing clinical research, do you maximise the information you're getting from those patients to feed back to the scientists? So they can use that for two purposes. Firstly, for further discovery science, because you're using man as the experimental model here instead of rats. Surely that's better. And also because they can then feed back to you incremental improvements in the technologies that you're doing. That's what reverse translation, the term, is supposed to be about. And I don't think we're terribly good at it yet, and we need to work out those pathways. We're moving on, so we're now looking at synthetic tracheas. Instead of relying on donor sources, we're looking at different ways of creating synthetic tracheas. So we've, with Alex Seifelian, is Alex here? Okay. With Alex Seifelian's group, there's a patented UCL product called POS-PCU, which is already in clinical trials for heart valves and coronary bypass grafts and lacrimal ducts. And we've used it to make tracheas for 2 people so far. One of them was a palliative patient, and we were able to tide her over and get her home for the final few years of her months of her life. And the other one is alive and well at 2 years. So synthetics are on the horizon, but they're not as good, we don't believe yet, as the decellularized materials. Okay, now moving on to some more general issues about clinical research. So here's another synthetic windpipe that went in last year, and that is about timing and weighting, and also one's approach to the media. So this windpipe was put in, and 2 weeks later, a big news story in the New England Journal of Medicine about how this patient from America had this windpipe transplant. And then a much smaller news story 2 months later about how he died in Baltimore. So one does have to be terribly, terribly careful about big splash news stories. Terribly careful. And that is why I've now, and with others, have sat down with the press offices of UCL and Barts, and of all of our major trusts, so that we all can agree how we can approach the proper publicisation of what we do in the future. Because it needs to be done properly, it needs to be done in a timely manner. There's a lot that can go wrong with cell science if it's done badly, and if you have rogue clinicians. So, for example, Death Revives warning about rogue stem cell clinics. You can look on the web, and very easily you will find 10, 20, 40, 100 maybe, rogue stem cell clinics scattered around the world, in South America, in Russia, in Asia, all over China, and have stem cell treatment for anything you can think of. But these are not proven therapies. And we're constantly contacted by email by patients who are saying, well, we're absolutely desperate. We've got this terminal illness which is no treatment. What do you think of us going off to China? And one has to be brutally honest about it. You know, there has to be a lot more responsibility. And happily in this country, we have that. Now, unfortunately, the route to get from clinic to the clinical trials is labyrinthine. We have this other chart which shows all the different routes, the UK roadmap. And this is Spaghetti Junction near where, do you live near this? Oh, on it. Oh, no, you live on it, yeah. Yeah. So it's a labyrinthine network. And actually, if you're a lone investigator or a lone clinician trying to tread this very, very difficult pathway, particularly if you've got complex products that have got cells in and maybe a bit of gene therapy as well, and maybe some chemicals to boost it, it can be very arduous. And the only way you can really deal with this is by teamwork. And by working with people who've trodden the path before, and by working with the regulators themselves. I'm very glad Ian's here today, another advert for the MHRA. But this is true, because the regulators are growing with us and continuing to develop, and they need more expertise to help them assess us, and we have to have a two-way dialogue the whole time. As this field advances, I actually think Britain is slightly ahead of Europe in this, in fact. The EMA are making some very strange decisions at the moment about regenerative medicine. So this is going to move us forward and help refine things. But we do need big teams to do it, and you actually have to employ people almost full-time just to do all of the paperwork associated with this. But it is doable, given the funding and giving the right contacts and the right networking. Drivers clinical research, well, money, of course, is one, not enough to go around. You need all this stuff. As people live older, we're going to have to keep people healthier for longer, and regenerative technologies have the potential to do that. Big strains on NHS costs, like this unsupportable strain from diabetes, for example. That there's less venture capital around these days. I met 3 of them last night. They're all understandably reticent. And also to nurture a new healthcare industry that is really in its infancy and needs supporting. Fashion, so some conditions are more fashionable than others. It's easier to fundraise for some things than others. It's easier to fundraise, for example, for breast cancer than it is for some of the rarer cancers like head and neck cancer, which tend to affect poor, alcoholic, smoking old men. So you know, there is a distribution effect there, and something we need to balance out a bit. Yeah, you were thinking like me, weren't you? This is very good. I know we've got a superb piece coming up later from Clive, and I'm certainly not going to steal any of his thunder. But if you do want a nice short piece that is a wonderful piece of journalism that approaches regenerative medicine from all possible angles, it's this by Fergus Walsh on the BBC website, which addresses the ending of a very high-profile stem cell trial in the United States last year, the year before, last year. And it's got all of the bits in it here. So it's got the bits from the trial people themselves saying it was entirely justified, and then people from patient groups saying how horrendous it is that there will never be any treatment for their condition, from jealous other scientists saying, well, they should never have been given the money in the first place, we should have been given it, from governments. It's just very nice encapsulation of how emotion, publicity, and raised expectations can muddy a field like this. Of course, demographic change, ageing, and different sciences. But we have to be alive to the fact that many of the things that we're using are in fact down to serendipity. And that's why we still, despite all this importance of clinical translation, have to support our discovery scientists, our basic scientists. It's absolutely fundamental, all of these things. This is otoacoustic emissions, invented by David Kemp, who's a scientist at my own ear institute. It's now used as the world standard for screening children for hearing. And IPS cells, of course. So. Okay, now this is something that the Rosetrees Trust is extremely good at, and this is supporting young people coming through in training, and supporting a new clinical cadre of people who are properly equipped to deal with the future, who are flexible enough, and at least have heard of the issues, even if they're not experts in all of it, is critical to us being able to continue to be at the forefront of clinical translation. Hitherto, clinician scientists like Dion and myself and others here have really just been like streams flowing down a hill. Where a rock has occurred, we've flowed around it, we've bounced off. There's not really been any direction, and by sheer chance, we've ended up in the pools that we happen to be in today. It doesn't necessarily have to be like that. This is one of our clinician scientists, this is Owen Hughes at the Institute of Child Health, who was an NHS-supported ACF, and then got a college fellowship, and then was supported by a number of small charities, then got an MRC fellowship. He's now developed a new cure for a rare condition of childhood, and he started his own spin-out company, and he's hopefully going to carry on working for us. These are the kind of individuals that the Rosetree Trust is extremely good at supporting and bringing through, and it's absolutely fundamental that we do so. Valley of Death, don't worry, I'm not going to say any more about it, apart from we can help bridge this. So where money is not able to do all of it, engaging appropriately with clinicians, I believe, can help us get across that. And the future is all about people, as the Rosetree Trust fully understands. It's facilitated multidisciplinary workforce. When I talk to school kids about this, I emphasise this, that it doesn't matter if you're not going to medical school. You might be doing engineering, you might be doing law, you might be doing biological sciences, you might even be going to languages or the arts. Everybody has the potential to have an input into this in some way or other. So facilitate, and whoever's facilitating this has to be able to subjugate their own ego. It's incredibly difficult for surgeons to do this. It's incredibly difficult, but it is very, very important. If you're really going to bring all these people together, you've got to make them feel that they're more important than you are. Internationalisation. This is going to be increasingly needed. We're doing this with EU grants and so on. But, you know, to speed that up, to get it down from the 15 years at the second translational gap down to 4 or 5, and at the first translational gap to get it down from 10 years to 4 to 3 to 2, we can do this, but we can only do it in big teams. And that actually is very difficult because you have to subjugate institutional ego. We don't have an institutional ego here, do we? No, but you have to subjugate that and work across traditional boundaries. And we have to be responsive to patient needs and keep listening and keep looking at the changes in demographies. And if you do that, Drucker is one of the doyens? What's the male of doyen? No, it doesn't matter. He's doyens of business management. And his whole, the way he changed business philosophy was to no longer concentrate on profit all the time, but to concentrate on the needs of the customers and on the quality that you're delivering. And that way he saved an awful lot of industry from going under. Sidney Brenner said the experimental animal of the 21st century is man, and we do believe that. We believe that we in our group are moving further and further away from animal research. Of course, the discovery scientists are doing fantastic work with the mice, who are now a wide variety of tools. But the more we can do with humans, the better. And even when we're working in animals, we're using human cells. So we don't, there's no point. If the aim is to develop a treatment for man, why know everything there is to know about a pig lymphocyte? And reverse translation is part of all that, of course. So the message is, clinicians hold the hands of the patients at the centre of research. The circle of partners is large, and we need to work with them all and subjugate our egos to do so. Balance restraints to guide, working with regulators, so that everything is balanced. So we're not going off and setting up our own institutes in some distant part of Russia, but on the other hand, things are moving forward at pace. And training a new generation of flexible clinicians who are flexible and responsive to the incredibly rapid changes in the regenerative medicine environment, something that the Rosetrees Trust is all about, because that's the way that we'll be able to support them to follow us to be better than we are today. I'll leave the last word to this lady. This is Brenda Jensen, who we did the world's second laryngeal transplant on a year or so ago. And she said, I don't know what the future may bring, but it sure will be better than what we've left behind. And for all of you researching in the biomedical field, the future is yours. Thank you.